Israel apparently has a problem currently with those complexities, and the pictures are always stronger than words, and people around the world do not get it that civilians are getting shields, that there are operations under hospitals, and so on and so on. I think that when we are talking about a law or any kind of international law, it's because we want to be sure that we are not taking any measure against the law. But it's not affected the Palestinian itself, the Hamas inside the towns and the area, because this law is not affecting them at all. And anyhow, at the end of the war, nobody will be claiming for because there will not be exist. So it's not important for our war against the Hamas, but as we can see and we can explain it in the international community, and it's important to explain it to the international community. We are doing the best that we can for saving innocent lives. But in that case, I have to say something that we have to be very careful with it, because when the Hamas and Palestinians in Gaza see this kind of activity of our IDF or also speakers that is explaining everything to the world, they are looking at this with another eye. They are looking at it like we are weak. They are not looking for saving lives. They are looking for us, and they see that we are weak. Again, we are holding the thought of humanitarian more than claiming war and doing effective war at the field. So we have to see what the Palestinian does. It look like. What's the message? What is the message that we are passing to them? We are passing to them that we are weak. We are trying to explain ourselves more than we need when we are talking about the point of view of the Palestinian.
Well, that's part of Israel's policy over the years, and IDF policy for better or worse. That's it. Ms. Vivian Silver, an Israeli-Canadian peace activist thought to be taken captive from Be'eri kibbutz, confirmed killed by Hamas. She was 74. In 2020, I-24 News had a chance to speak to her about her activism. Take a listen.
Women Wage Peace was founded in the aftermath of the 2014 war in Gaza, protected life. It was the third war that we experienced in a period of 5 years. I am a resident of the area of what they call the Gaza envelope, Kibbutz Be'eri. It was one war too many in too short a time, which sparked responses from all over the country. Women got together, 20 women in a room, and said, what can we do? And what came out of it was the movement, grassroots movement, that has grown to 50,000 members today in Israel.
There's also no doubt that for many living in Gaza, for many innocent Palestinians, as we know, of the 2 million or so residents, citizens there, they,
Tell us about Vivian, about your corporation activities.
many are very young, many children are
Yes,
getting killed. And as a
Vivian, she
father,
was a special woman, a very nice woman, and she acted with our organization, the Women Retreat. I know her since 2014.
when you said enough is enough,
Today, it was very
there's also
difficult
no doubt
day
that for many
for
living in
all
Gaza,
of
for many
us.
innocent Palestinians,
I
as we
don't
know,
believe it.
of the 2 million or
We
so
went together
residents,
4 days
citizens there,
before
they,
3 of October.
I think it's more than
We were
half
together.
of child age.
We met, we
Many are
talked,
very young children. Many
and
children are getting killed.
I don't
And
believe
as a father,
Vivian should not
like me,
hear more.
as a father, it is utterly
very
hard
difficult.
to see so many thousands of children being
You
killed.
know,
Nothing
we
obviously
have
to do
known
with this.
each other for
Again, this
9
comes
years,
back to this moral quandary I have.
so I
You know,
have
it's
no
interesting when you
words.
said enough is enough in that
Very,
tweet.
very
You
difficult.
know, some people are already saying, even if they're very sympathetic to his
Especially
need
because you
to take out
both
Hamas,
believe in
they're
peace,
looking at
both
these
of you.
fairly apocalyptic
And
scenes
yet
in Gaza,
this
thinking,
is what happened.
enough is
What,
enough of that.
what does it tell you?
You know, in
Where's the
other
hope
words,
for peace?
No,
the revenge is
Vivian was
already
a peaceful
far
woman,
greater in terms of death
and
toll
she
than
talked
the
all the
original
time
appalling terror
about
attacks.
peace,
There's also
and
no
she
doubt that
needs
for
all the
many
time
living in Gaza,
peace.
many
I'm also, yeah, and we are a lot of women in Women Wage Peace. You know, all the time we talk about the future. We want good future and normal future for all of us. And don't have a loss, really. And I think that, you know, we can't talk because I don't believe that it's tedious from the morning when, you know, I heard about it. Make me really sad because I believe peace now, and I think we don't have any solution, only peace, and we have to continue, yeah, in our way that to live and making peace, and this is their way also. We will continue talk about peace and what peace we do it. I hope peace will come soon. I hope that nobody knows that now. He knows what will happen. Only we have to train for peace. And what can I say? And to say to Vivian, I'm so sorry about what's happened with her. I'm so sad. It's very difficult. I know that it's very difficult for all of us today, especially today, and we have to continue to talk about the peace, and we don't have other way. The solution only peace.
Yeah, quite amazing that you still believe. Amala, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I want to ask you, I mean, we have about a couple of minutes until the end of this part. Israel controls the northern part of Gaza. What's next? What about the southern part?
We know that this part of Gaza Strip is just 20% of Gaza Strip till the south side in Rafah. We know that Hamas is holding positions in the south side. They are launching missiles from that area, not from the north anymore. So I think it's just the doctrine and the tactic of the IDF to cut the Gaza Strip for two or for a third, and to make sure that Gaza city will be whole, and then they will move actually to the south. But it's just a tactical. All Gaza Strip will have to wipe up.
And sooner or later, Israel will have to control the Egyptian Gaza border, right?
Yes, of course. I think that when we are talking about the future, the end of this war against Hamas in Gaza, we have to think about who's going to go inside and control everything. And this is a thing that a lot of people are now speaking about it. International community is speaking about it. United States and Egyptian will have to deal with it also.
Right. So, okay. Okay, thank you very much, mate. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back with more special coverage here on I-24 News.
Israel is in a state of war. Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she as our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
De la haine et du terrorisme. Et nous avons répondu présent. À Paris, le 13 novembre, comme vous l'avez mentionné, 130 jeunes ont été assassinés.
Welcome back to I-24 News special coverage. We'll go to the north now. I-24 News, Pia Stecker there live. To you, Pia, what's happening?
Right, well, Jacob, the cross-border confrontations between Israel and Hezbollah are continuing. We've seen several launches of anti-tank missiles really alongside the Israel-Lebanon border throughout the day. We're speaking about localities such as Margaliot and Metura, the very eastern part of the upper Galilee area that have been targeted, but also Arab al-Ramshi, which is more on the western part. That really shows you that both mortars and anti-tank missiles are being launched from different locations in southern Lebanon towards different areas in northern Israel. So earlier today, a suspicious object was intercepted above the skies of Acre, above the shores there, without triggering any alarm. That just really shows you how these skirmishes between Israel and specifically Hezbollah and southern Lebanon are continuing. This is just a regular events that you see, really the same events throughout the last weeks. We're speaking about first and foremost mortar shells and anti-tank missiles that are being launched. The Israeli military saying that earlier today They targeted one squad that was on its way to launch an anti-tank missile towards the kibbutz of Yiftach. This is where more or less a week ago one Israeli civilian was killed from exactly an anti-tank missile. Now the situation here is very volatile and very tense. We're here in the city of Kiryat Shmona, a city that has been evacuated because of the tense situation. We're about 5 kilometers away from the border. And earlier today, Benny Gantz has toured this area, Kiryat Shmona, Metula. Benny Gantz, the leader of the National Unity Party and also a member of the current war cabinet and a former defense minister. Benny Gantz said that we will not go back, the country will not go back to a situation that has been here the 6th of October, of course, referring to the reality here before the war, and that they will restore security here, of course, speaking to the security concerns of people who have been living here so close to the border, those who have been evacuated now. And many of them, we do know, are fearful to come back here after the war because the threat that Hezbollah poses on the other side of the border. Remember, it has been here before that current war started. I want to remind you of those tents that Hezbollah placed on the Israeli side of the border in summer. So these skirmishes, of course, this is a new level of escalation also in the wake of this new war. But the threat and the danger that Hezbollah poses very, very close to Israeli communities in northern Israel has been there before. And the residents here have been asking themselves for a long time when the Israeli military will actually refer to those, and Benny Gantz now reassuring that they will get to them at one point without presenting a specific plan.
Right. Just to reiterate, along the border, we have ghost towns, basically. Dozens of thousands of Israelis have been evacuated. Nobody lives there by the border now.
Right, Jacob, we're speaking of dozens of Israeli communities here that are in proximity of about 5 kilometers to the Lebanese border. Residents there were asked to evacuate. We're here in the city of Kiryat Shmona, a relatively big town, about 20,000 residents that has been evacuated within the past 2 weeks. Yes, last week the residents again were asked to evacuate this area immediately. But just like in the south, you will always have residents, you will always have inhabitants here who decide to stay, choose to stay in their communities because of their work. Many of them also work in agriculture along the Israel-Lebanon border, or those who want to guard their communities. But the situation here is tense, it is dangerous, and also here in the city of Kiryat Shmona, it is a ghost town. This is the situation also with many communities who are even closer to the Israel-Lebanon border. As I said, we're here about 5 kilometers away from it, but we're speaking about also communities that are as close as 2 kilometers, Yiftach, Metula, that are still coming under constant fire from anti-tank missiles. That is very dangerous to be there. So civilians have evacuated the area, and many of them without really knowing when they will be able to come back. And this is something that people have to deal with. And this is also something that Benny Gantz tried to address today, saying that we will not go back to a situation like it was before. But there's no real plan in terms of how this area is going to look like after this war and how the threat is going to be addressed after. And so far, people have left these areas without knowing if and when they will be able to come back here.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Live, the northern border as well. Back in May, Hezbollah released an assault on northern Israel, including storming the border fence, almost exactly as what happened in Gaza a few months later. Is this the next time? Middle East correspondent Ariel Sohail.
Hamas's October 7th onslaught on southern Israel caught the country completely by surprise. Well, maybe not entirely, since the IDF had been preparing for such a scenario, just not in Gaza. In fact, they had known about it for years.
I say to the fighters of the Islamic resistance, be prepared for the day when war is imposed on Lebanon, and the leadership of the resistance may ask you to conquer the Galilee.
The elite commando force tasked with this mission, the Redwan Unit, named after the late leader of Hezbollah's military wing, Imad Mounia, nicknamed Hajj Redwan, and with 5,000 highly trained fighters, the main mission of the Redwan Unit is to infiltrate into Israeli territory and conquer towns or bases in Galilee.
The Redwan force is considered Hezbollah's most elite unit. It is well trained in urban and guerrilla warfare, given its extensive experience in fighting terrorism in Syria.
Back in 2014, Lebanon's pro-Hezbollah El Mayadeen TV station aired a breakdown of Redwan's attack strategy, copied almost exactly by Hamas last month in its rampage in the south. It begins with a massive opening rocket barrage. Then, the elite force's 5 battalions storm the border, each designated with taking control over a different area of Israel's north. The
goal to seize the territory for as long as possible, while killing as many Israelis, soldiers, and civilians as they can. And following Hamas's success, Hezbollah is escalating cross-border attacks, including striking the border and creating gaps along the fence, has Israel concerned.
Hezbollah is dragging Lebanon into a war. That might happen. It is making mistakes. And who makes these mistakes here? Those who will pay the price are first and foremost Lebanon citizens. What we are doing in Gaza, we can do in Beirut.
The reason for these threats is their high level of concern regarding what is happening on the Lebanese front and its development in terms of quantity, quality, and depth. Of course, we will continue this position and this performance.
Pay attention to what's happening on the ground, not what we are saying, Nasrallah suggested in his speech. And the situation on the ground is indeed slowly but gradually escalating.
Here in the city, we have now Israeli Minister of Police of the ruling political party. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for hosting me. Let's talk about the north, about Hezbollah. It wasn't acceptable back in Gaza. It seems unacceptable over there in the north. What's the plan? First of all, it's unacceptable. We will defend our people. I just came from Nahariya. I visited Nahariya yesterday. I heard our citizens, and I heard the mayor and his deputy. And they are saying I can say to you, that they want us to act. But as you know, now we are dealing with the Gaza Strip, with the Hamas in Gaza. First of all, we're defending our people around the border. And near the border, Nahariya is like 10 kilometers, 8 to 9 kilometers from the border. And others, we will continue to defend them. But now we're dealing with Gaza. This is the goal of the government, of the cabinet, and we are doing it, and we continue to do it, Yaakov, until we defeat the evil, and this is an evil. And then move to the north to deal with this problem. First of all, we will defeat them in the south, and then you can ask me again to come and I will talk about the north. Specifically, let's talk about Gaza. Is Israel going to attack under the Shifa hospital, maybe other hospitals in Gaza? I will tell you, Shifa and the other hospitals, actually, underground, it's not an hospital. You know, I came from Rambam Hospital, and there is an underground hospital. In Gaza, it's not the same situation, actually. It's the, let's say, the headquarters of the terror, the headquarters of Hamas. This is and you saw the pictures yesterday that they brought by the IDF spokesman. In Shifa, other places, the Indonesian hospital, and the others. I will not talk about specific items and specific details, but we will do whatever is necessary to defeat the Hamas, including their leadership. And I mean, most of the leadership are underground. So what are the efforts in order to move patients out of the hospital, civilians? It depends on Israel, of course, that we will do it. You know that the problem is not Israel and not the IDF forces. The problem is Hamas. And you saw the pictures, they don't want them to move from the north sides of the part of Gaza to the south part of Gaza. So they want us to actually to save the innocent civilians in Gaza Strip, in the Gaza Strip. Israel is still determined to act under the hospital. I don't want to, as I said, I don't want to be specific about the operation, but if we want to actually to destroy Hamas, and this is the goal of the war, we will do whatever necessary to do it. Let's listen to President Biden from just a few minutes ago talking about the hostages and possibly a deal. Okay.
President, can you address the hostages directly and give them a message of hope and resilience that you travel?
Yes, I can. I've been talking with the people involved every single day. I believe it's going to happen, but I don't want to get into detail.
What's your message for the families?
Hang in there, we're coming.
So the president says he believes there might be a deal, of course, no commitments. How do you see that?
You heard the president. I think that he said that he don't want to talk about specific details. We can quote him. And I want to tell you something. First of all, we are doing a lot of effort to what you call in your, they called it a deal. Okay, let's say that it will be a deal. The Americans involved and others, and I want to show you something, actually, to you, Yaakov, and to the audience around the world, and to you as well. I visited the Yaakov family 2 days ago in Gan Yavne, and you can see here, yeah, Yagir, this is his name. He's not. He will be actually 30 years old in the end of November, and he actually supposed to celebrate his bar mitzvah. We want that he will celebrate his bar mitzvah here in Israel, in his home, with his friends, and we are doing everything that we can that he will be until the end of the month in his home with his friends in the bar mitzvah celebration with his family and with the others, of course. And as you know, there's a lot of other hostages. It says there,
Don't let them spend the winter.
I agree. So until the end of November, it's still autumn, as you know. We want them to be until the end of the. We want them to be here tomorrow. And I heard President Biden. It seems that he is optimistic, and I want to be optimistic as well. With your permission.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, of course.
You're a political person, so I want to ask you a political question. Do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Likud Party will stay in power after this?
I don't think that it's a question to these days. I will tell you why. We're in the middle of the war. There is no opposition. There is no coalition. I'm a Likud member, but I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm an Israeli minister. I'm not dealing with political issues. I think that we'll have the time to we will deal with it, of course. But right after that, we'll defeat the evil. Now we are fighting the evil. It's not just Hamas organization. I can accept it. It's not. They did worse things than the Nazis did in the Second World War. You know, you saw the pictures from Be'eri. I visited in Beirut a few days after, and in Kfar Aza as well, and in Sderot and Ofakim. We will defeat them. Then, please, if you want me, I come here and I answer all the political answers.
But still, why does Prime Minister Netanyahu not taking any responsibility? You think it's responsibility?
It's our responsibility. It's all of us. It's the government, it's the cabinet, it's the IDF, it's the others, all of us. All of us. And I think that, and I said it, by the way, in the first day of the war, this is our responsibility because we are in power as a government. And even though I'm not a cabinet member, I think it's all of us, all the ministers, and as I said, the IDF as well, the Shabak, you know it, from close, the Shabak as well, all of us, all of the leadership of the Israeli state of Israel, and we will give you all the answers to all the difficult questions. I have to tell you, it will be difficult questions. We'll do it. Not now. Now it's a war. We must win the war. And I want to tell you something. We will win
After the war. Mr. Ophir Koenig, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. With us now is Shadi Halul from Alma Research Center. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Yaakov.
I want to talk to you about what's happening with Hezbollah in the north also. Now, what are the chances that the UN decision, the famous one, 1701, ever be implemented over there?
Well, 1701 resolution by UN resolution actually was supposed to be implemented a long time ago. Unfortunately, this was implemented only for like maybe a very short limited of time, and Hezbollah breached this resolution, and they have been building up their force in the border even before this war actually started. We anticipated actually this attack of October 7th that it will happen in the north first, and we expected that Alma Research and Education Center that we would have a war in September with Hezbollah actually, by somehow attacking us in different ways, and including this scenario that we saw in the south. Now, if you ask me about Hezbollah implementing this 1701 resolution without any pressure from international community and from Lebanese people themselves and Israeli government, this will not happen by itself. It should have an action from our side in order to make this happen. And we will see what our leadership will do for implementing this resolution.
Stephen, you said that you're going to sit down meet. This is not going to happen by itself, as he says. If at all, how can you impose this on Hezbollah?
Look, again, about Hezbollah is very important. And also I want to say something about what the minister has said. When we see Hezbollah, we have to understand that Nasrallah will not do anything without any permission and order directly from Iran. So who's controlling this event is Iran. Of course, Hamas did something against their plans because Iran was planning to do all the event and control it, and as we can see, Hezbollah will not do anything to push IDF to the red line now. So at the end, something will happen because, as we can see, the minister and also Gantz that was in the north today, Israel will not control any Hezbollah on the lines anymore. They will be inside Lebanon, and we have to be sure that we have pushed them there. So it will be some kind of action now or later, as we can know. And another thing that I want to be aware of is that what we see here, what we hear here, they are listening. They are listening for what we are saying all the time in Hezbollah and in the north and in the Shia and Iran. Everything that we will say, every argument that will be between us in that time is giving them the impression that we are weak. So we have to be careful that they will understand that we are determined to end this action. And
that's a good thing to do. Policies and others, democracies, you have arguments there.
Yes, of course, but they hear us and they are listening very carefully for what's happening here. And it affects them to act or not to act.
Shani, I want to get back to you. You said something interesting about the Hezbollah actually planning to attack before. That was in the works. So if that's true, maybe it's going to come sometimes in the future.
Jacob, I can tell you that we are in Alma Research and Education Center. We are focusing on the northern fronts and Israel's security challenges in northern front. We have been taking delegations on the border with MPs from the European Parliament and congressmen and journalists from all over the world coming to visit us and taking them to the border in Zarit, in Shtula, and all the northern front up to Metula. We saw Hezbollah building up its force and its power in the border. The guards really are there. The terrorists are in the border. We saw the videos. It's not like a secret anymore. We saw it every day happening, and we were in the border every day, and we see the changes daily. So we anticipated in our research department that the war will come in September 2023. And we were actually missing it by maybe 7 days. It came in October 7th, but surprisingly, from the south it started, and then it moved north. We are actually at low-scale war now. We cannot say we are not at war with Lebanon or with Hezbollah, sorry. We are at war. The question is if we are going to full-scale war, and if Hezbollah, if we will move the security zone back to the northern side of the border and not southern part of the border. What we have now, the situation and the reality, that we created a security zone inside Israeli land, not inside their lands. That's the funny thing, that we are now evacuated our citizens. We created a security zone inside our territories and not inside their territories. And this is something that needs to be changed. This something that we need to deal with after maybe a few days or a few weeks, but we need to eliminate this threat. Otherwise, we are in a very dangerous situation. We will not allow having another October 7th here in Northern Front. And Iran is leading, I agree, everything here. It's managing everything. We are fighting Iran. Hezbollah is Iran, and Iran is Hezbollah in this front. And it's not only this front, it's unification in front. It's here, it's in Syria, and it is in other fronts that extend all the way to Iran.
Right. Amit here is nodding in agreement to what you said about the zone being inside Israel now. But I want to ask you, Shadi, after what's happening in Gaza and very powerful images coming out there, does that make any impact on Hezbollah, on Nasrallah?
It makes impact. Of course, it makes impact. Nasrallah knows that he will be affected, but again, he cares less about Lebanon and the state of Lebanon. I can tell you that Hezbollah, their final aim is to control Lebanon and change its system and political system and control it. They see themselves as the largest sect in Lebanon. 50% are Shia in Lebanon today. And when Lebanon was founded, to remind you all, it was founded based on Maronite Christian Aramaic request of having independent state in this as a called Lebanese state. And the Muslims, which is Shia and Sunnis, didn't want this state from the advance to be created. So Hezbollah now feel as the strongest party and the strongest force in Lebanon to impose themselves on Lebanese people and control the Lebanese state and change the political system. So if a war will make this happen finally in the last stage of this control of Lebanon, they will do it, not because of helping Palestinians, but because of their own interest and Iranian interest that to extend the caliphate or the Islamic revolution state from Iran all the way to the Mediterranean, what we call the Persian Empire back then, but under a cover of Islamic Shia cover.
Yeah, big plan. Amit, there's a sentiment in Israel that the paradigm should be shifted and changed. Now, that must include Lebanon and Hezbollah, otherwise you haven't done much.
Yes, we know that the threat is there. The only, in my opinion, the only reason that Hezbollah is not getting over this red line is the threat of the American troops against Iran. And Iran is holding just because of that. The minute the area, the region will be calmed down, American will be out, we will see the Hezbollah getting in from the north as Hamas got in the south. So we have to eliminate it now when we prepare, it's not a surprise for us.
Yeah, but the Americans don't want it. The Americans want Israel not to do it.
It's not that kind of a warning. And actually, at the end, in my opinion, Israel has to do what we need to do. Not because anybody in the world will say that it's good for us.
Yeah. Shadi, we have a minute to go. Is a war in the north between Israel and Hezbollah inevitable?
Unfortunately, I don't know what to hope. If to prevent war or to have war, because in both cases I am here having a very bad scenario. If I don't go to war, then our citizens will be threatened to have another October 7th and larger than that here in the north. And if I go to war, we will also have a damage on our communities in the north. But I know that we can eliminate this threat, and maybe after eliminating it, we might have peace or type of peace with the Lebanese, different government or different people that will take control of Lebanon and not Hezbollah. We need to do this work, and it doesn't matter what Americans think. And this, let me remind you, in the 70s and 80s, the Americans
so that we should not eliminate maybe or go to Lebanon and fight Palestinian jihadist Fatah party that did a Fatah land in South Lebanon. At the end, we did what is good for Israel and for the interest of Israel to protect our northern communities and citizens. So that's what I expect Israeli leadership to do and eliminate this threat so we can continue to prosper in this region and have maybe peace afterward with the Arab countries.
Maybe. Shaggy, thank you very much for that. And David, also to you, thank you very much for coming. This is top of the hour. Soon we'll take a break and we'll be right back with more special coverage here on I-25.
Made for me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Israel is in a state of war. Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where is she as our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
עם ישראל כולו, כולו איתכם לדורות והנעדרים הביתה, כאן.
Special coverage here on I-24 News. Hamas used huge amounts of weapons on the February 7th attack. Now, some of these weapons are exposed by the Israeli army. Omar Rabin reports.
Inside this tent, the full array of Hamas firepower, vast in size and very sophisticated. The Israeli army invited the foreign media to come and see for themselves the weapons the terrorists used in their October 7th onslaught on southern Israel. Some of these weapons were left by the terrorists before they withdrew and went back to Gaza. Other arms were captured after terrorists were killed in battles.
This tire, filled with explosives, was specially made for the border fence posts. I open it now. It can be closed like this, so that it surrounds the fence posts on all sides. It is connected to a detonator from this side, and when it is detonated, the column will collapse, and Hamas militants will be able to infiltrate the kibbutzim on the Gaza Strip.
And this means that they had the exact measurements beforehand.
Yes, they took the measurements of the fence posts under the pretext of demonstrations and other civil activities. This frame is handmade.
Some 80% of Hamas's weapons are made local. The remaining 20% Russian-made from the Soviet era, or North Korean, Egyptian, and Iranian. Russian, North Korean, and Egyptian weapons were smuggled to Hamas through a third and perhaps even a fourth party. They were dismantled and parts of them were hidden in food and aid shipments. And Hamas manufactures their duplicates inside the Gaza Strip and even explosive devices.
This is a list of medical equipment explaining everything that this bag contains. It is intended to enable wounded Hamas terrorists to continue fighting. The large quantities of this equipment were intended to allow Hamas to continue the fighting inside Israeli territory for a long period of time.
A huge amount of weapons indicates the amount of intelligence and financial resources that Hamas invested in its military action throughout the years. But it also shows the extent of the difficulties and dangers facing the Israeli forces now during their measured ground advance in Gaza.
Now live to the city of Sderot in the south of Israel, there the Color Fighters for news correspondent is standing by there.
That's right, Yaakov. So we're here on the Gaza border where we continue to hear the IDF acting heavily inside the Gaza Strip. But we're here at the northern portion of the Gaza Strip, which is an area that Israeli military conquered and took over within the past 2 weeks. That they pushed further deeper south into the Gaza Strip. So it's unclear right now exactly what the activity here is on the northern border. But heavy Israeli artillery as well as mortars throughout the evening here now. We can also see the signs of them operating inside the central Gaza Strip area, dropping a number of different light flares over the sky that have been illuminating the area as forces are working on the ground. This comes as Israeli military has fully encircled the Shifa hospital. Of course, as we also heard in that report just mentioned, the IDF continues to warn about the weapons and how these hospitals are being used by the Hamas inside the Gaza Strip in bases for their attacks. We continue to see the IDF trying to operate in this area. We know it is fully encircled. There are tanks that can be seen in the streets outside the hospital. Right now, the IDF is also trying, they say they're working to bring incubators, mobile incubators that can be moved. Some of these infants who are besieged inside this hospital. The Gaza hospital, for the Palestinian Ministry of Health, for its part, says that they have not received any contact and they're not exactly sure where to go. IDF is also trying to give fuel to the hospital, trying to keep some of these generators running, but that did not transpire as far as we have heard. The Palestinian Health Ministry is saying that they were unable to actually access the location that they were given. Those inside the hospital say that they are unable to leave and hearing shots firing out in the area.
Mary, thank you very much for this report. It's now raining in southern Israel and the Gaza Strip, which may affect the activities over there, by the way. With me here in the studio is Ambassador Daniel Alon, former Israel's ambassador to Washington. By the way, we'll go to Washington live soon. There's a huge rally in the works over there. But I want to ask you about the hospitals issue in Gaza. Israel tried to make the point that there were maybe hostages there under the hospital and the weapons and all of that. At the same time, yesterday, literally at the same time, President Biden said that Israel should not get too intrusive inside the hospitals. That of course, caught the headlines, not the Israeli version of things. And no cooperation, no coordination there, apparently, between Biden and the spokesperson of Israel's IDF. So the point being, is Israel going to take this risk of getting in there, doing the job, in the IDF's view, as opposed to public opinion?
Well, at the end of the day, Jacob, I think we have no choice, we have no alternative, because in order to take Hamas out, that means to really dismantle their entire structure, infrastructure, and leadership, institutions. I think they're doing a very good job with their institutions. They're encroaching, meter by meter, and very, very careful. I don't think there's
other military operation in the world is taking so much care, painstaking care, not to hurt civilians. I just heard your reporter, Jacob, saying that actually the IDF, I don't know of any other soldiers in their gear who are carrying babies incubators, and they're taking them into the Shifa in order to facilitate taking out all the patients. It will take patience, but at the end of the day, I think that the siege will continue, and I think it will be best for the international community in order to put the pressure on Israel, put the pressure on Hamas. Hamas is hurting their own population. They should, if Hamas will understand that Israel will not be criticized for doing what they have to do for self-defense, then maybe they will have less incentive to actually hijack and then keep under gunpoint their own population and patients in hospitals.
Right. Let's listen to what President Biden said just a short while ago about the possibility of a hostage deal with Hamas.
President, can you address the hostages directly and give them a message of hope and resilience to keep going? Yes, I can. I've been talking with the people involved every single day. I believe it's going to happen, but I don't want to get into what's your message to the families? Hang in there. We're coming.
So President Iran, the president has been talking to people every day, he says, and he's hopeful. What do you make of this?
Well, he has been hopeful now for the last 30 or so 38 days, and we all are. But we have to understand that we are dealing with a very devious, conniving, most pernicious organization that will love to keep playing with the sentiments of the families of the hostages. They have no regards, and I think the international Red Cross also failed in putting the pressure, so the international community will demand that at least they get a list. Until now they did not give a list. Who do they have? Let alone having the ICRC people, the Red Cross coming and visiting them to see what conditions they are in. It's a brutal situation, and we'll have to, it's a very frustrating engagement with them, but at the end of the day, we'll have to do what we need to do, and hopefully there will be the tension is that they want as few hostages to be released, trickling down, drink, so they can prolong the ceasefire, so they can regroup. That's the game of Hamas.
Right. Well, recent reports talk about maybe 70 or 80 hostages for 5 days of Israel stopping the attack. IDF was quoted, IDF sources were quoted as saying, no way, we're not going to stop for 5 days. So this is going to be the give and take and hard choices for Israeli government.
Very hard choices. The 5 days ceasefire could really see it's a huge change, because right now Hamas are on the run. And we know, at least in northern Gaza, we have not really dealt in a severe, thorough way the southern part, like Khan Yunis and the Rafah areas. But in Gaza itself, and all the areas north of Gaza, they are not there. I mean, they are there as individuals, but not as a commanding formation of a military operation. And if you give them some time, they will continue, they will regroup, and they will connect all the dots together, and will be another threat.
Including supplies, hearing on land and under land.
Right.
Now, that brings me to the question of what's happening in the Egyptian Gaza border. I mean, Israel will have to take control of that if Israel wants to eliminate Hamas.
It seems like the whole paradigm of actually closing Gaza to the world and opening it to Israel, with the workers who come to work and with getting all their supplies through Israel, this did not work. And I believe that it will have to change the paradigm where Gaza is closed up, vis-a-vis Israel, maybe even IDF has been attacking Hamas operations and people belonging to Hamas over there. I-24 News Robert Swift has more on that.
While Israel fights in Gaza, it's striving to prevent its northern border from erupting. But the north isn't the only potential new front that is simmering. Violence in the West Bank has spiked since Hamas's October 7th assault. 8 Palestinians killed in an overnight raid by the Israeli military in Tulkarem were claimed by the Hamas terror group. Israeli troops entering the West Bank city on an arrest operation were confronted with live fire and explosives. Palestinian medics said that 3 of the killed were struck by a drone. IDF bulldozers tore up roads inside the town to mitigate against improvised explosive devices in the second raid into Tulkarem in a week. Similar raids and clashes have taken place elsewhere in the West Bank, with an operation into Jenin last week sparking a firefight and drone strike. 176 Palestinians have been killed in confrontations with the IDF since the beginning of October, according to the UN Commissioner for Human Rights. Attacks by Palestinians have continued, with 1 Israeli reserve soldier killed in the West Bank. And friction between Palestinians and Israelis living in the West Bank is soaring, with several Palestinians killed by settlers since the outbreak of war. With the IDF focused on Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in the north, its resources are not limitless. But if the West Bank violence escalates, this could impact Israel's wider war effort.
With us now is Colonel Dr. Moshe Elad, former coordinator to Palestinian Authority on security issues from the IDF. Thank you very much for joining us. What is exactly going on in the West Bank in terms of Hamas influence these days, these hours?
Well, I think that most of the population is watching what's going on in Gaza and doesn't want to have the same scenarios inside the West Bank. But here and there, for example, mostly in the area of Samaria, there are also, I would call resistance enclaves, like some in Jenin, some in Tulkarem, a little bit in Nablus, and they are still trying to fight. This is why the fighting brings so many killings and injuring people, and they suffer a lot, I guess, today. Everybody understands that. But I should say it's not a kind of an intifada. It's not something that takes every people, together inside, just here and there.
Now, Hamas has been creating some support for itself in the West Bank over time, maybe thanks to the fact that the PA was getting weaker. Is this the Israeli goal now to dismantle Hamas in the West Bank the same way it's been done in Gaza?
It is done. I guess that in these very days we see that. Together, by the way, with the coordinated security people from the PA, I mean, there is a lot of coordination and cooperation with the Palestinian Authority, and they are doing together, like in the last years, I guess. We have a common, in this area, we have a common enemy. It is called Hamas. Now, more than ever before, I guess, the Palestinian Authority is involved and integrated in this work. And if you ask me about before October 7, I would say there was always a threat to the Palestinian Authority from Hamas. Today, after the arrest of about 1,000 people, after the suffering that they had in a couple of areas, the whole picture changed, and no more.
So those who entertain the idea of having elections in the West Bank, including Hamas, this is all history.
Definitely, I guess that also the PA is getting also weaker and weaker. I don't know who is suggesting that they will probably take over in Gaza because they have problems and a hard time taking over in the West Bank. Maybe the only area that they are running is Ramallah, a little bit in Bethlehem, and that's
way that neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority will be able to rule efficiently the West Bank and, of course, North Gaza. They are very weak, both.
All right, Moshe, thank you very much for that. Tanya and Lori in the studio. Let's talk a little bit about the day after. If the PA is so weak, who's going to take control of business for the Palestinians?
Well, certainly not Israel. We should not get into this trap again. Not in Gaza and certainly not in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority, cannot be trusted. Unfortunately, not only they're weak, they're corrupt. And basically, they are very much anti-Israel. They have a different tactic than Hamas, but also they are hell-bent on the demise of Israel. You see in their curriculum what they teach their children. There's no compromise for them. There's no peace for them. There's no coexistence. Actually, they're talking about one Palestinian state. When probably we'll talk about it later, Jacob, about the battle cry of the BDS and of all the Islamists and Palestinians abroad in the United States and Europe is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This is the battle cry also of the Palestinian Authority. It's not just Hamas. We have to understand that. So it is a dilemma. And again, here, there may have to be some kind of an interim where maybe some international organization will have to take over. No trust in the UN. But I have a lot of trust because the Egyptians, the Jordanians, they have a lot of problems with Hamas in their own countries or Muslim brothers, and they know how to take care of them. They know them very well. If we brought some kind of the practices of Egypt and Jordan into the Palestinian Authority with some money from the Saudis or the Gulf, maybe then we have a chance for a real revolution, but it will be very slow, and it has to be from the grassroots, and we don't see it.
I'll be a little bit skeptical about this, with your permission, about the Egyptians. As you said, it's complicated, and it's going to be very challenging, but we'll wait and see. Meanwhile, a new protest in Tel Aviv, Rabbi Avidan Friedman went on a hunger strike and locked himself in a circle until the Red Cross visited Israeli hostages. More in the next report.
The White Plaza outside Tel Aviv Museum of Art has been turned into Hostages Square. Over the past few weeks, several installations, protests, and public events dedicated to the 240 Israeli hostages have become a regular feature, but this particular spot is quite unique. On Friday, November 10, Rabbi Avidan Friedman decided to draw a circle and to stay inside it until the Red Cross visited the Israeli hostages Hamas is holding in Gaza.
I came here to say I'm not moving from this spot, drew a circle around myself. I'm not moving from this spot, and I'm not eating until we have a visit from the Red Cross. And my call is to the state of Israel to tell it that the people of Israel insist that there cannot be selective humanitarian aid. And as long as there's not humanitarian visit of the Red Cross to all of the captives, we cannot continue to allow humanitarian aid to Gaza.
Friedman, originally from Montreal, Canada, is known for his activities in the organization which asked Israel to stop selling arms to human rights violators. He's now calling on other people to join him and spread his message.
My wish is that there should be 240 circles here. 240 circles of people sitting and hunger striking and saying, we will not move from here until this happens. And definitely people are already starting to join.
Rabbi Friedman also referred to Honi HaMe'agel, a Jewish sage from the 1st century CE, who according to tradition drew a circle, sat inside it, and told God he would not move until it rained.
I pray to God that he helps us, but I think God is also depending on us and wants us to do what we need to, and so I call on the state of Israel to stand by its citizens in the strongest way possible.
The Red Cross told Israeli media recently that it's their job to provide humanitarian assistance to all civilians, but in order to do so, they need to be given access inside Gaza. Meanwhile, families of the abducted Israelis and those who are helping them continue their struggle.
Back to Ambassador Allen here in the studio talking about hard decisions. The hostages issue. Hamas has been blaming Israel, maybe the world. Some sorts of deals are coming up and down all the time. Very hard dilemma for the Israeli government, and the Israeli public seems to support some sort of broad deal.
Yes, I think it goes, part of a victory is bringing back our hostages home. It's a Jewish thing, it's an Israeli thing, it's our ethos, and this is a key to winning any battle on the ground. And Hamas understands it. That's why they are playing in such an evil way against us. But I think, as hard as it is to analyze and to hear, it seems like the first choice was to try to get a deal in the very first days of the war. But it was quite clear that Hamas was procrastinating, buying time, and actually wanting the ceasefire. And then the tactic changed to more military pressure. Actually going into Gaza, the penetration, the ground invasion to Gaza started almost 2 weeks after the massacre of the 7th of October. This time was actually given to Hamas to see if we, or to the Americans and the Qataris, the Egyptians, to see if the deal can be done. Only then, when they realized there is no deal with Hamas, with the ground invasion, I think this is maybe the only way to put the pressure on them. And when they understand that maybe their own survivability is at stake, unless they, effect a major deal, maybe this is the only way, because there is no other.
Yeah, well, we're talking about deals. We're 6 weeks into this thing. We should remember there are children there, women, babies, and IDF believes, according to its intelligence, that a woman gave birth in captivity during these weeks. And keep playing with deals, no deals, conditions, those and others, and no rush in the international community.
Not at all. And you see, where is the ICRC, the International Red Cross? Where is Gutierrez that was so happy to criticize us and to put a context? How can you put a context into the Nazi-like, barbaric, sadistic murder? We don't hear any pressure for the release. As we mentioned, not even to visit them. This is the ABC of humanitarian law. And another thing is, I think Qatar is a key. Maybe more pressure on Qatar, because Qatar, they are the bloodline, the oxygen, if you will, for the Hamas. If they were to lose out of not having a deal, maybe then they would become more aggressive negotiating with Hamas. Right now, it seems like Hamas is calling the shots. And we should change this so that Hamas will be on the receiving end, not on the deciding end.
That way or another, Israel is determined that Hamas will never be back in power in Gaza. This is clear cut, right? Yeah, nobody should expect anything else.
No, and even the American, from day one, Jacob, all the way down, President Biden said that, Blinken said it, and until now, they say because they understand that Hamas not only is ISIS, that with Hamas there will never ever be a chance for peace. Just like now, I believe that the timing of this attack was not accidental. And coordination, whether it's a direct coordination or by understanding, broad understanding, it was to scuttle the Saudi deal. The moment there is any chance for peace in the region, whether with Israel or the Saudis, whether it was with Israel and the Palestinians, Hamas already in the 90s, had all this suicide bombing because they do not want a deal.
All right, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll see the families of the hostages in Israel marching from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And also we'll be in Washington, D.C., where a major rally in support of Israel is shaping up. Short break, we'll be right back.
Israel is in a state of war. Families completely bent down in their beds. We have no idea where see as our soldiers are fighting on the front lines. Like the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Welcome back to our special coverage. Israel's police commissioner, Kobi Shabtai, is given a detailed briefing on the atrocities committed by Hamas on 7th of October. I24 News defense correspondent Jonathan Breggett filed these updates. Jonathan.
More than 5 weeks into this war, the focus is now naturally on what is happening in Gaza, the IDF advancing, the situation in the Shifa hospital. But as far as Israel is concerned, it is extremely important to make sure that the whole world remembers why this war broke out. And that is the atrocities committed by Hamas terrorists on that terrible morning of October the 7th. And for this purpose, the Israeli police is conducting a major investigation, by far the biggest investigation the Israeli police has ever conducted. We're speaking of tens of thousands of video files, more than 1,000 testimonies, all of them relating to those events happening on that Saturday morning. And foreign members of the media were present this morning as the Israeli police unveiled some of the files and some of the testimonies that it has in this investigation. And we were able to speak with Dudi Katz, who is the officer in charge of this investigation, of this major investigation. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Well, after the events of the 7th of October this year, it was decided by the Israeli police to allocate the investigation to LAB 433, the National Unit for Serious and Organized Crime. We are dedicating ourselves for the last month to collect evidence for all the atrocities and all the actions committed by Hamas in Israel on the 7th and 8th of
October. As I mentioned before, we are gathering evidence, first of all, against Hamas members who've been arrested here in Israel during their actions. Second of all, we are proving what happened in every establishment, in every kibbutz, in every army base, in order to provide the evidential ground, the evidential base for the future prosecution of the arrested Hamas members here in Israel. Systematic killing, systematic kidnapping, and possibly even systematic sexual assault. All these are charges which the police is now investigating, and due to the very large scale of this investigation, it is supposed to take months, but as some hundreds of Hamas terrorists are held in Israel, the aim is, of course, to prosecute, to indict all of them, to make sure that they remain behind bars for the rest of their lives. This is just some of the aims of this major investigation, and more than anything, making sure that everybody here in Israel and around the world remembers the context of this war, all of it relating to the atrocities committed by Hamas on October the 7th. Jonathan Reagan, I-24 News.
Thank you, Jonathan. We'll get to Washington now, where big rally in support of Israel is gathering steam right there next to the Capitol. With me, Daniel Alon, former ambassador to Washington. You know this view, Danny, very well. This is going to be a very big rally, some sort of response from the Jewish community, the American Jewish community, the Jewish federations, and it's about time.
Well, it is about time, yes, and we know how effective they are. Listen, the Jewish community in the United States is second to none. They are brothers. They have been so supportive, and they, you know, they have a great stake, just like all of us here, in the well-being of the Jewish state and the Jewish people. So I think what they're doing is something which is necessary, effective, and the more that they gather, the better. I spoke with one of the leaders of the federation, and I know that they are expecting a lot of people. Thousands of buses are going to bus them in. And what's nice about it, that you see it's so peaceful. People are singing and raising American flags and Israeli flags. They are not going against anybody. And it's a strike difference between this and the Palestinian and the Palestinian supporters demonstrations.
And not only support for Israel, I think that this time especially, it hits home for them. The demonstrations by Hamas supporters, anti-Semitism, people are scared, people are buying guns. This is the reality in the United States.
Yes, and we have to see, you know, what is this new anti-Semitism? It is mostly derived out of this hatred, senseless hatred of Palestinians and jihadist Muslims that come together against the state of Israel and against the Jews, wherever they are. This is kind of their creed. This is what they study in their studies from day one. And then, and what is really baffling here, is that they are actually connected to those younger generation of progressives, you know, the starry-eyed that do not have anything, any understanding in history. And they are the ones joining these Islamists, actually, who will kill them next, without even thinking. And this is what, so they're the useful idiots by the Hamas supporters. And I think that there will be a reckoning and a wake-up in America, because at the end of the day, when you look at these demonstrations of the Islamists, the Palestinian supporters, Hamas supporters, they are anti-Americans. I mean, it's just shocking to see how they turn up and bring down American flags from poles to put Palestinian flags instead of American flags, taking kafirs and putting kafirs on icons, like American historic figures, like on the statue of Lincoln or Washington or things like that. This is something that I believe at the end of the day will bring America to wake up and actually put a limit to this wanton behavior of theirs. Mostly they're immigrants. soon is going to bring up again the issue of immigrants. And we know next year there's going to be elections in the United States, and immigration is one of the big issues dividing the two parties. But I think with this behavior of the Hamas supporters and the Palestinian supporters in America, I believe more and more Democrats, and I can hear already my friends in the Democratic Party, will turn against it, and will make joint force on a bipartisan basis to really limit and marginalize those immigrants.
Right. We'll get back to that later. Meanwhile, European countries are now all on the same page when it comes to this war. Here's our 24 News senior correspondent, Orna.
For Israel, the word from Brussels is tempered, with the 27 European Union member states clawing their way in recent days to a careful compromise on the Gaza war.
We ask for an immediate pause, saying that is brutal, but it is an objective. This immediate pauses and humanitarian corridors.
That focus on humanitarian causes is the kind of center of gravity that positions the EU in line with the Biden administration, that tackles the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, and most importantly, that balances between Israel's supporters and critics in Europe.
I understand the impulse for a ceasefire, but impulses are not enough to help people, to really guarantee security and peace.
It is unacceptable that Hamas should again have the opportunity to re-establish itself, gather weapons and attack Israel.
And so Germany leads the camp in Europe against calling for a full-on ceasefire. Another testament to the special relationship between a post-Holocaust Germany and Israel, now pitting Berlin against Paris, in the wake of French President Emmanuel Macron's fiery interview last week with the BBC. So the two European powers are divided, with Austria and Hungary and Belgium and Ireland also again taking different tacks on Israel. As long as Israel keeps the support from a core camp, the European Union as a whole will not call for a ceasefire, although the tone from Brussels could change.
For more on the European position, we are joined by correspondent Alex Carrier in Brussels. Thank you very much. Is there one unified position towards what's happening in Gaza and Israel?
Well, there is a unified European position, and we've seen that from a statement in the last few days from Josep Borrell. He is the EU's top diplomat, their foreign minister, effectively, in that position called for an immediate pause, or immediate pauses in hostilities and the establishment of humanitarian corridors, saying that the EU stands by Israel's right to defend itself within international law. They also condemned Hamas for the use of hospitals and civilians as human shields, and called for Hamas the immediate and unconditional release of all the hostages held by Hamas. That is the official unified position, but as we heard in that report, the member states themselves become a little bit more divided as individuals. We've seen Spain, Portugal, Ireland that were mentioned there. They are calling for a full ceasefire. We saw the French President Emmanuel Macron saying that he hoped those humanitarian pauses would lead to a ceasefire, so changing language from the Elysee Palace. So those are some of the kind of divided positions within the member states. We also heard from the EU's foreign ministers. They were assembled in that building behind me, the European Council, yesterday, as to what a lasting peace after the conflict would look like. They had 6 points that were agreed on. 3 no's. No to the forced displacement of Gazans, no to the reduction of the size of Gaza, and no to the return of Hamas. They also had 3 yeses. Those yeses: yes to Gazans being involved in the solution, yes to a single authority for both Palestinian territories, and yes for more involvement of the European Union. So certainly a difficult position, but it is 27 member states trying to agree on what is a very contentious issue in Europe.
The EU as such would be interested to be involved in some sort of a solution in Gaza or elsewhere in the area, maybe in the Lebanon-Israeli border, something like that?
Well, they're certainly wanting to be more involved, trying to find a solution. We heard in the last few days practical solutions being put forward by those European powers, most notably Cyprus, talking about that maritime corridor of aid to Gaza. That is something that Europeans are warming to, although again, finding an agreement between 27 member states for solutions is quite complicated. But we saw from those proposals, or at least that common sentiment from the EU's foreign ministers assembled here on Monday, that the idea of more EU involvement is something that they are open to. We've seen an increase in humanitarian aid by the European Commission for Gaza. We've seen practical solutions proposed by some member states, but consistently throughout, whenever they make any pronouncements or any statements on this conflict, they repeat that they stand very firmly by Israel and try to defend itself.
Correspondent Alex Kennedy, thank you very much for that. Back to the studio here, Ambassador Daniel Iran. The EU basically presents a balanced position at this stage. We're kind of wait and see.
Yes, and of course, when you look into Europe, there is Northern Europe and Southern Europe. Southern Europe is more critical of Israel. It's always been the case, Portugal and Spain. In Northern Europe, we have a problem with one country, which is Ireland, which is pretty much in the pocket, I would say, of the Palestinians from the time the IRA and the PLO were cooperating on terror together. But it is difficult. The EU, 27 countries, it's like herding cats. To get an EU position, it will always be the lowest common denominator, and this is why it will be less effective. Now, there's another problem with Europe right now, that, the big elephant in the room is the Ukraine and Russia. This is where all their focus is. So for them, here, what's happening in Gaza, it's something which commands attention, but not more than that. And they're very much gearing towards what to do in Europe, how to really bolster NATO countries and the collective security of Europe, especially after the Brexit, when the United Kingdom is not part of the EU. And by the way, we see it already here with the arms, the weapons industry of Israel is booming because more and more European countries are looking for Israeli solutions.
Just talking about the other day, another system from Israel, defensive missile system, and others as well. And definitely see this. Let's go back to Washington and watch what's going on there. A very big rally supporting Israel is shaping up here. And I want to ask you, Danny, about the great party you've mentioned, and maybe the relationships between the Jewish vote and the Democrats. Is this something that might be looked at as well?
Absolutely. People are talking, and I saw this Rashida Tlaib, this anti-Semite congresswoman, Palestinian congresswoman from Michigan, threatening Biden that he will not get their votes. Well, with all due respect, most of the votes that, let's say, come from this end of the political spectrum are from the Jews, not from the Muslims. And between 65-70% of Jewish votes go to the Democratic Party. So they do have a lot of influence, let alone the main campaigners, finance campaigners, are big Jewish business people and philanthropists. So the Jews in America and the Democratic Party are pretty much almost one and the same. So I believe that what we see here in Washington today with these huge demonstrations will do something in the hearts and minds of the leaders of the party to continue and support Biden and Blinken on these two issues. First of all, to do away with Hamas all the way and to protect Israel from worldwide criticism. And secondly, anti-Semitism. I believe that this has become a national plague in the United States, where maybe even tougher legislation and tougher enforcement has to be brought to bear. And I think this is also part of the importance of these demonstrations and the goals and objectives of this demonstration.
Now let's go live to Mike Wagenheim, our 24 News correspondent in Washington, D.C. with the rally over there. Mike, how does it look from there?
Absolutely packed out here, Jacob. I apologize in advance if I can't speak into me. It is packed to the brim here at this rally right now. Israeli music superstar Shai Rivos here for the crowd. This rally hasn't even officially international ball here is absolutely back to the rim. Up to 100,000 people, according to the National Park Service. It feels about today that you look back behind us here, we don't see any empty space. We're going to have entertainers here today, Broadway stars, politicians, leaders from the Jewish community. President Isaac Herzog will chime in remotely from the Western Wall in Jerusalem, all to get behind the state of Israel, the anti-Semitism, and the call for the release of all the hostages and bringing back home to Israel. The largest gathering of Jews in a long, long time here in the United States. The community essentially took the day off today, Jacob. All of the Jewish institutions, a lot of the schools, Yeshiva University in New York, they all said you're free to go to Washington today. They packed.
Yeah, Mike, we're losing you, unfortunately, but we can get the atmosphere over there. Ambassador Aaron, we see major support of the Jewish community over there. And as he said before, more than ever before, it struck home. The anti-Semitism wave in America, as you said, is something that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yes, and what I'm waiting to see is this gallery of speakers. I know that there was a list, a long list of leaders, bipartisan base, Republican, Democratic leaders that will come and speak up. This is very important. Also, what is important is that you will have the entire, I would say, whole segment of the American demography. And we will see their Hispanics, we will see their Afro-Americans. This is also very important because anti-Semitism is a plague, not only against the Jews, but against everyone. It always starts with the Jews and then it ends up with everyone else. So it is very important for them to stand up firmly, to have as many people as come, and to have these speeches from the leaders. I think that will be very, very important to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, we are just under 1 year to elections. Things are changing in the United States. And how would that affect the policies also in the U.S.?
Oh, very, very much so. I think if until this war, I think all the focus was on internal issues. And usually we know that elections are being lost or won in the United States on domestic issues. It's the economy, stupid mostly. But with such instability in the world, with such threats around the world, starting with Ukraine, but also China vis-a-vis Taiwan, and of course what we see here now with Iran. We have to remember the war with Hamas is actually a war with Iran. Iran is the mastermind, and they still are planning actually to take the entire region over. So this may play a part in the elections as well. And here I also believe we will see a bipartisan support for Israel against anti-Semitism when it comes to U.S. internal domestic politics, and hopefully we will see Jacob, and this will be the real test for the Democratic Party, whether they will marginalize the progressives, because part of the progressives are, as I said, some of them are either useful idiots, some of them downright anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, which is one and the same. So hopefully maybe this will be an opportunity for the Democratic Party to rise above this way and to become more coherent when it comes to decency, when it comes to morality, and to side with the right side of history.
Now let's go to identify news. Zach Anders, who is with the families of hostages in the city of Tel Aviv tonight. We're going live to you, Zach.
We've had to move positions here because of a rocket strike on southern Tel Aviv, and it's right over my shoulder. The damage is quite extensive. We've learned at this hour that a 20-year-old young man was injured seriously, and a 43-year-old woman suffered minor injuries. That 20-year-old man, I spoke to someone who rushed up to provide life-saving aid, said that a bit of the rocket had lodged itself inside his stomach, that his hand was severely injured. going to be saved. The injuries were so severe. I'll step out of the shot here so you can see some of the damage that we're seeing. The crater is behind this vehicle that is severely burned. It started a fire with the vehicle, but the crater itself actually hit a water main. And some of the people that were here say they saw water shooting up several feet into the air, and that actually helped put out the fire. Now, the crater itself is several feet deep. You can see the puncture to the wall is also quite extensive damage there. And the tree behind it has most of its limbs on the side facing the road blown away. It's quite a bit of shrapnel damage as well to the home behind it. You can see, obviously, some of these folks are taking a look at the damage. Some of the homeowners are trying to assess what's been lost, what can be saved. There's a man right now who's looking through a sizable hole that's punched inside into the house. The force of some of the damage here is quite incredible. Again, a 20-year-old injured and a 43-year-old woman also injured, not as seriously, but that 20-year-old seriously injured. And the ambulance service here, Madame said they rushed him to a nearby hospital. We're waiting to receive word. This was from the earlier rocket barrage that came in around between 6 and 7 o'clock.
All right, Zach, thank you very much for this report. There's now a siren in the southern city of Eilat, the most southern city of Israel, and according to previous experience, that might be something that is coming out of Yemen. We're not sure at this point. We'll see in a few minutes when we keep finding out what's happening in the city of Eilat, the most tranquil city in Israel, Danny. And this is where regularly now.
Most of the evacuees from the Gaza border towns were going to Eilat for a little bit of R&R, relaxation and relief. And this is what they see. And again, you see, it's all Iran. The Houthis of Yemen, they have nothing to do with Israel. We've never been at war with them. There are thousands of miles different, distance between us and them. What are they doing here? It's only because of the Iranian policy and grand strategy of uniting the fronts against Israel, of actually keeping Israel under siege from the south, from the north, from the west, and from the east. Right now, we're just stripping down. It's more kind of a bothersome. It's not something which is a serious security threat, but there should be some reckoning there as well.
Yeah, just a thought. All roads lead to Iran.
All roads,
which is on the verge of being a nuclear power.
yes.
So what's going to be the end?
Well, you see, the Iranians, they fight, and they will fight until the last Palestinian, the last Yemenite, the last Syrian, the last Iraqis, the last Lebanese. And until and unless the countries in the region here will understand, most of them they do understand, but when the people will understand that Iran is not their ally, Iran is just using them as cannon fodder. Only if there is a major change there, then we will see Iran getting back into their natural size.
That includes countries like Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely.
But Saudi Arabia just woke up racing.
Yes, it's a part of the game, the what do you call it, the thrones,
Games of Thrones.
The Games of Thrones, absolutely. And there's no love lost between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Still, the Saudis see Iran and the Ayatollahs as their main existential threat. But, they have to hedge their bets. And when it was seen that the United States may be leaving the region, they had no choice but going to Iran. But I think things can change now.
All right, and that's what Daniel. Thank you very much for being with us. Stay tuned for more special coverage shortly with Khaled Ben David here on Night for News. Have a good night in Tel Aviv.
but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caregiver. It is day 39 of Israel's war against Hamas. And IDF troops continue to make progress in North Gaza, striking over 200 military targets of that terror group, taking over key government buildings, and seizing full control of the Shati neighborhood just north of Gaza City. With this at the cost of the lives of 2 more soldiers, bringing the number of the fallen in combat in Gaza now to 46. Exchanges of fire continue on the northern front, with Hezbollah launching anti-tank missiles across the Lebanon border, and the IDF striking back at its positions there. Missile launches from the Gaza Strip also continue, with 1 person seriously injured from rocket shrapnel right here in Tel Aviv this afternoon. The IDF confirming today the death of 19-year-old Corporal Noah Marciano, who apparently died shortly after being kidnapped into Gaza on October 7th, but did appear in a hostage video released by Hamas yesterday, filmed right before her death. 2 other deaths from October 7th also confirmed today, with the positive identification of the bodies of the 12-year-old Liel Hatzroni and 74-year-old Vivian Silver, both murdered in kibbutz Be'eri. May their memories be a blessing. Also taking place in Washington, D.C. right now is a March for Israel rally, as you can see there. It looks like even hundreds of thousands of people have gathered on the National Mall to both express support for Israel and to march against, take a stand against anti-Semitism, the wave of anti-Semitism we see. We will bring you parts of that rally later in the program, including Israeli President Isaac Herzog expected to speak. In the meantime, though, let's go up north and our correspondent, Pia Steckelbach, who is in northern Israel. And Pia, rainy weather in Israel, and unfortunately, rockets, fire, anti-tank missiles continue to rain down on northern Israel from South Lebanon.
Right, Caleb. Well, those cross-border attacks continue coming from southern Lebanon. There were several anti-tank missile launches throughout the day. We're speaking about communities like Metula, like Margaliot being targeted in the eastern part of the Upper Galilee area, but also the west. Arab al-Aramsha was targeted as well. So we're speaking about continuous cross-border attacks really alongside the Israel-Lebanon border. The IDF issuing a statement earlier today saying that a squad attempting to launch another anti-tank missile close to the community of Yiftach was targeted. Now, Yiftach is a community where about a week ago, Israeli civilian was killed by an anti-tank missile. Also, at noon, and a suspicious object was shot down in the skies above the city of Acre in the shore area, not triggering any alert. So that really shows you that those skirmishes between between Israel and Hezbollah are continuing. Also, the Israeli leader of the National Unity Party and also member of the War Cabinet, Benny Gantz, has been visiting, has been touring some border communities today, such as the city of Kiryat Shmona, a city that has been widely evacuated, and also the community of Mektula, in the very eastern part of the Upper Galilee area community that is really sitting on the Israel-Lebanon border. He's been touring these communities, and he said that the country will not go back to the situation of October 6th, of course referring to the reality here at the northern border before the war, and that the goal is to restore security here, because I want to remind you, Khaled, skirmishes and threats by Hezbollah were also very much real on the northern border here before the war broke out. I just want to remind you of those tents that Hezbollah just placed on the Israeli side of the border in summer, also there triggering major tensions here in the region. And this is also Benny Gantz speaking to the concerns of the residents, of those who have been evacuated from their homes, not knowing when they'll be able to come back, how the reality will look like after this war ends. And Yoav Gallant, Benny Gantz is saying that they will speak to that, to those concerns, but he's not issuing any concrete military plan for that as of now.
All right, and we are actually expecting the defense minister to speak this evening, and we will bring you that live. Maybe he'll refer to these matters. Please step up there on the northern border. Thank you for that. And let's focus back now on the Gaza front. The IDF said today that it is coordinating the transfer of incubators for newborns from an Israeli hospital to the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City, as its forces continue to operate ever closer to a facility that also houses Hamas's key command center in northern Gaza. Now, this comes as the IDF released footage from within the basement of another Gaza medical facility, Ramtisi Hospital, showing stashes of weapons there, and also evidence that it possibly held hostages kidnapped on October 7th. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Soran has more on how Gaza's hospitals and what lies beneath or adjacent to them have become crucial battlegrounds in the war against Hamas.
We're now in the area of the basement of the hospital. I want to show you a room where we found all the gear, the operational gear of Hamas. Hamas is using hospitals, like we showed the evidence in Shifa Hospital. In other hospitals, we are now seeing it in live in Ramtisi Hospital. An operation still conducting right now.
As fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas edges deeper into the heart of Gaza City, hospitals have become a key focus of the IDF. Terrorists to hide weapons and possibly hold any of the 239 hostages kidnapped on October 7th.
This kind of gear is a gear for a major fight. These are explosives. These are vests with explosives. Yeah, it's a body vest for terrorists to explode on forces. Among hospitals, among patients, we have hand grenades, Kalashnikov, and then we have the RPGs. People shooting RPGs from hospitals. This is Hamas.
The booby-trapped hideout beneath the Ramtisi Children's Hospital in northern Gaza is located near the home of a senior Hamas commander. It was uncovered by the IDF's Navy Elite Shayetet 13 Commando Unit and the 401st Armored Brigade. As they raided the hospital, which was evacuated days earlier, they came in contact with Hamas fighters holed up in there.
A woman, clothes, and a rope. A rope next to the legs. And look above this. Look above it. It's a baby bottle. It's a baby bottle in a basement. Above, a World Health Organization sign. This is a suspicion for an area where hostages were being held.
A few feet away was a motorcycle, believed to be used to transport hostages from Gaza into Israel on October 7th, as well as what appeared to be makeshift bathrooms, a kitchenette, and improvised ventilation pipes.
In this room, there is a list. This list, in Arabic, this list says we are in operation. The operation against Israel started in the 7th of October. This is a Guardian list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own sheet guarding the people that were here.
Meanwhile, amid growing criticism over Israel's fighting near hospitals, the IDF said it is coordinating with Shifa's management the transfer of incubators for newborns from an Israeli hospital to Gaza's biggest hospital, and released a phone call to the manager.
أي مساعدة إذا بدك ناكل هدول الأطفال وهدول المرضى، إحنا جاهزين أي مساعدة. لو بجيب لك انكوبيتور وبحط لك إياهم في باب المستشفى، بيعطيك مساعدة؟ بيعطيني مساعدة، بس حكيت لي إنه في 37 اليوم صح؟ 37 صحيح. أوكي خليني أشوف إيش بقدر أعمل.
And so, as the fighting continues and nears Gaza's hospitals, used by Hamas as their above-ground shields, Israel will continue to send in special forces, rather than airstrikes, to avoid hurting patients and also to uncover further evidence that can shed light on the situation of its hostages.
And with us in studio, our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Altman. And Owen, those hospitals, not only a military problem, but as made clear in that report, it's a diplomatic problem, it's a public diplomacy problem. Israel is taking every care it can before it actually will have to go, and especially in Shifa Hospital, and launch a military operation there.
And it's frustrating. It's frustrating. After that briefing from IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari last night, one would have thought that the Israeli view of what's happening in the hospitals, the Israeli proof of what's happening in the hospitals, would have in a much more determined way, have penetrated the international consciousness. However, it hasn't happened. The international media has reacted very, very skeptically, including reporters who were there with Hagari, right? While he was there filming that video, took a long time in reporting back on what they saw, and seemed to have done it very skeptically. At the same time, when relatively speaking, they're much more trusting, it has to be said, of the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. And in a sense, at best, presenting the Israeli military's claims on the same footing as the Hamas health ministry. I have to say, I'm not sure what more the Israeli military could have done, and what more the Israeli government could have done, and what more Israel's advocates could be doing. There is so much hand-wringing in this country during this war, as there always is, about the performance and the investment and the effectiveness of Israeli public diplomacy. But you look at an event like last night's briefing, you look at the 24 hours or almost 24 hours that have elapsed since then, and you just ask yourself what more could be done. I guess the only hope is that once the dust is finally settled, right, once the situation at Shifa Hospital has resolved itself, and once the information there has been made clear and the documentation there has been done, and we can finally maybe speak to some of those civilians and some of the hospital staff in a way where they won't feel intimidated by Hamas, maybe then, maybe only then, that's maybe our last hope, the truth of what happened there will be clear to all. But it hasn't happened yet, and I think that's to the collective frustration of all of us.
Right, and of course, even after that, there will be those who will dispute the version that comes out of Israel of those things. Well, let's go now to the south, and our correspondent there, Mary McCall, in Sderot. And Mary, we've seen rocket fire today from within Gaza, here in Tel Aviv even, but of course, even as the fighting, even as there's real progress being made there in North Gaza.
Border communities throughout the day today, at least 15 different times. Also in the past hour, sirens ringing out in Eilat. It is unclear yet exactly what transpired in Eilat. Local paramedics say they didn't receive any injuries of reports from the most recent sirens that were activated in the area, but footage online now emerging showing what appears to either be missiles or air defense working to intercept the missiles that were fired at that southern city. We do know the Yemeni Houthis have been firing missiles at the southern city for some time now, and we do know they gave harsh words today warning Israel about its actions and saying that their response was going to continue. We will still be checking these updates and bringing to you later, but all in the meanwhile, fighting is clearly ongoing, especially also in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, in areas where allegedly Israeli military has already moved far past as they continue to encircle in parts of Gaza City. Here in the north, right on the border, we are seeing some of these ongoing battles still happening very near these border areas. It's mostly Israeli tanks who will continue to be firing from around this area, but we can hear the constant sounds of mortars. Israeli airstrikes also currently going on, and this does come, of course, as Israeli forces are inching closer to the El Shifa hospital within 2 or 3 blocks, it is said, from that hospital complex.
Right, and IDF you completed the capture of the El Shakti camp in Gaza, right to the north of that Shifa hospital. We should note you're down there in the rain. Rain complicates matters, both for the Israeli troops, both for air operations in Gaza, and yes, also for the civilians, especially the displaced civilians in Gaza.
Absolutely. I mean, here on the border
Mary, I'm sorry, you know what, Garland is speaking. We'll have to go to the defense minister now.
Second stage of the war in Gaza. During the first stage, we attacked with heavy fire, and in the second stage, for 2 weeks now, we've been operating with many forces inside the city of Gaza. We have breached the defense lines and the fortifications, both from north and from south. And I'd like to say something about these fortification lines. This is a very broad strip of fortifications, some of them beneath the ground.
Hi sa ating dalawang viewers dyan. Nagsasalita yung ano natin dito sa Israel. Si Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
They are interconnected through tunnels. Every such pier reaches the upper floor, and the forces of terrorists come out of it trying to strike our forces. The lethality and the precision displayed by the forces was very impressive, and the breaching enabled them to reach the city center. You saw the Golani soldiers sitting in the parliament of Gaza. This is of great significance. I can tell you that in the north of the Gaza Strip, Hamas has lost control, and actually we are in control of the entire area above the ground and the central area in the north of the Gaza Strip, and especially the city of Gaza. For every pier, and there are over 500 such piers that we've discovered, we saw a connection. And this connection is a connection to a school, to a mosque, to a hospital. And yesterday you saw how things look like at the Rantisi hospital. That's where motorcycles with the hostages arrived, and the forces also arrived there, and our hostages were held there, and there are hundreds of such places throughout the city of Gaza. This entire city is actually one fortress of terrorism, which the IDF manages to carry out its mission in an exceptionally good way. Exceptionally well. I approved the IDF's operation. I gave my approval for the army to continue to progress today and in the following days in order to complete the missions in line with the instructions of the cabinet. And I would like to say from this stage that no place in the Gaza Strip is immune until we complete our mission to bring back the hostages home and to dismantle Hamas, to completely rid it of its military as well as governmental capabilities. We are indeed focused on the Gaza Strip and the southern front, and we are acting there with tremendous success and with great forces. But at this time, we also know how important it is to look out for the security and safety of the people living in the north of Israel. And I'd like to say this, the security of the civilians in the north and in the south is equally important. We are well prepared in the north as well, and we will know how to take on any threat. Every few days, I encounter the hostages. I encounter their families, and I hear about them, the hostages. And these are heart-wrenching stories, stories about children, women, parents, and also some very elderly parents. Sometimes I hear these stories from grandchildren and sometimes from their children. And I think about these people, the generation of the founders of this country, Holocaust survivors who established these communities, these villages in the south of Israel, and are now experiencing a second Holocaust. And I'd like to say to all of us, what moral right do we have to stop this battle as long as these people are held captive by these savages from Hamas? For me, every such meeting with the families, every conversation about the Holocaust survivors is not just a dialogue that stirs up some very strong emotions. For me, this is also a moral compass. For me, for the Chief of General Staff, for the IDF troops, and for all those who are carrying out their missions. Today, I saw the land of Israel in all its beauty, and I saw the people of Israel at their best. I met in the south of country the troops, the civilians, the mayors, and I also saw the entire system that's helping them with the assistance of the IDF and the Ministry of Defense to rebuild everything. And I look at this joint activity, a lot of volunteers, some of them senior officers, others civilians, former mayors, current mayors, as well as a lot of people coming from these communities. They all have one goal: to create the return to this region. They are all busy in solving the problems of destroyed homes and security lines, and they're also very busy with agriculture and finding solutions. And I see all this strength, and what I'm thinking is that this is a continuity. Am Israel Chai, the Israelis, the Jewish people lives, and people are extremely committed to return to the region. The troops are committed to the defense of this region, and I told them agriculture, settling the land, and security are one and the same. We are going to carry out our mission and make sure that you are secure and you can plow the land, the fields, until the very last acre. Our goal is to win this war, and winning victory means that a military threat will no longer be posed from Gaza, that Hamas will cease to exist, and if any kind of threat is created, we will be able to act against any threat with complete freedom of action. I think that this is our part. There's an unwritten contract between the government and the civilians. We are going to provide security so that you can live your lives and do whatever you need to do. And indeed, there are two components necessary for this victory. The first is a very powerful military, and the second is a strong society. I think we have both, and God willing, we will win. Now we will move on to questions. Moti Castel from Channel 14. Good evening, sir. And with the backdrop of reports on an upcoming deal for the release of hostages and the visit of the chief of the Shin Bet in Egypt, I'd like to hear from you. What can you tell us about it? And what can you promise Israelis that it won't include such a deal? For example, just like we had in the Glachali deal, and also the fuel issue. We are committed to two goals and two goals only. One is to win over Hamas and to completely demolish its military and governmental capabilities and infrastructure. And the second is to bring back the hostages. When I pressured to carry out the maneuver a few weeks ago, one of the main reasons was to increase our pressure over Hamas. The increase of pressure over Hamas, this is what brings up the options. Had we stayed near the fence, these things would have lasted years. But in this situation, there are options coming up, and hopefully they'll be exhausted. Moria Assavolberg from Channel 13. Sir, the narrow cabinet is convening this evening to discuss the hostages deal. How long will it take until we reach a deal? Will it be realized over the next 2 weeks? And following the previous question, the current deals include the release of terrorists. Even seen while the engineer of this massacre was released in the Shaliti, the release of hostages, as the government plans to do, doesn't that bring with it some kind of security risk for Israel? I think that I just provided a very accurate answer regarding what I intended, and I suggest that whatever has to do with processes that are related to future activities we wish to carry out, let's leave it at that. And in that respect, it's best to not disclose everything. What about the release of terrorists? I'm not getting into the terms or the actions. I don't think that this is the significant element. We have two missions, and we're going to deliver both. Yoav Eben from Channel 12 News. Sir, President Biden says that he believes that the hostages deal will happen soon. Do you also think so? And are we indeed talking about 5 days of a ceasefire? And wouldn't be a problem for the IDF to return in full swing? And also, you've announced today that Noam Marziano was killed in the hand, had died in the hands of Hamas. You probably didn't only rely on the video. What can you tell us about it? As for your first question, we are going to continue to act, and we are still acting as we're speaking in the heart of the city of Gaza in order to carry out all of our missions. This has two values. First of all, exerting pressure on Hamas, and it makes it possible to perhaps reach various processes regarding the hostages. On the other hand, there is the main value, which is related to breaking Hamas's ability to defend themselves from us. There's one thing that's clear: we can no longer live with this phenomena called Hamas at our border, because we saw what that meant. What was your second question? The second question was about the fact that you have announced the death of Noam Marciano at the hands of Hamas, and I can assume you didn't just determine that based on the video released by Hamas yesterday. What can you tell us about what happened? I think that the IDF statement is sufficient, and the details it gave her family are accurate and true. Hadass Greenberg from Kan 11.
All right, well, we just heard the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant give a briefing this evening, presumably in place, perhaps, of that given nightly by the IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. Much of it was about morale building on the home front, but there were some interesting points. He did say that Israel is now in complete control of all of northern and central Gaza above ground, implying that the next phase of the operation is to go to the tunnels. He also said that no place in Gaza is immune. This is maybe a reference to southern Gaza, which Israel has said was a safer zone, but has indicated that if there is a valid military target in South Gaza, it will act in there, and there have been such operations that have been conducted. I want to go now to Washington, D.C. Of course, that big rally there. Tens of thousands, like hundreds of thousands, have gathered there on the mall. Natan Sharansky, you see speaking now. And I believe we have our correspondent there, Mike Wagenheim, maybe on the line. All right, let's listen to a little bit of Natan Sharansky. I'm sorry, we have the audio of Natan Sharansky.
Remember all those faces of Jews from America, from Britain, from Canada, who were coming to us, to Moscow, to support us, to understand that KGB is lying. Because you were bringing so much love and so much strength to us. This picture of one Jewish fighting family was always in my head. And that is why it was so clear that whatever will be my personal fate, the outcome of our struggle can be only our victory. This clearness, that as long as we all stand together and fight together, we will win, is that what gives us hope today in Israel. Because we in Israel go through difficult days. We go from one funeral of the soldier who...
Natan Sharansky, of course, the famed Soviet refusenik. And seeing Natan there, it brings to mind another mass movement especially by U.S. Jews, the movement to free Soviet Jewry. Now, as he was the key symbol, I think, of that movement, now coming back to Washington for this event.
It's incredibly emotional. Let's try to put Natan Sharansky back on the screen. We won't be able to hear him, but we'll be able to see him. Kalev, it's not only the connection to the fight for Soviet Jewry, it's the connection to the march. It's the connection to the march. Let's try to put Natan Sharansky back on the screen while I talk so people can see him while I speak. Kalev, 1987, right? This is the third in a series. Here we have Natan Sharansky on screen. Kalev, this is the third in a series of major marches by American Jews. There's this one, reportedly maybe 200,000 people there, far exceeding expectations.
Yeah, more, because we were talking about 60, 70,000.
Far exceeding expectations on a work day, people coming from the four corners of the United States to Washington, D.C. There's this march. There was a march in 2002 at the height of the Second Intifada. I was there, I remember it, I was a student. And then there was the march in 1987, maybe the biggest and most momentous of all. I was in elementary school. There were 250,000 people there. We flew in from Detroit on chartered planes there to Washington, D.C. and back in a day. I was so short I couldn't see over the crowds of people. But it was, for me, a formative experience. It made a huge impression on me, as it did, I think, on people in my generation. And here we have Natan Sharansky coming back full circle. Again, the symbol of that fight to free Soviet Jewry, a year before he had been freed. I saw him a few months before in a visit to Detroit, our synagogue. I shook his hand. He was an icon, he only had one thing to say to me. It's, I think, September of 1987. Are you coming to the march? And I was there in December. Again, short enough that I couldn't see over the crowds. But now this new generation, there are other kids in elementary school who I'm sure are taking a day off school to be there in Washington, D.C., to be there for another momentous march of American Jewry mobilizing in really, I want to say an unprecedented way, but there is that precedent of the fight for Soviet Jewry. But people coming from across the United States, including from Detroit, where I grew up, hundreds, if not thousands of people, and again, hundreds of thousands in total, we understand, coming there together from across the political spectrum, Caleb, across the political spectrum. Americans for Peace Now is there on the ground. They're on the ground because they understand, just as all of us do, that this is a true emergency. And the mobilization of American Jews that I think has been so inspiring and has gotten attention here in Israel, in the face of rising anti-Semitism, right, to not only come out today on this day in November on the Mall in Washington and make their voices heard proudly together, but also in the fundraising, in the mobilization, and helping to make friends and neighbors understand the reality of what we in Israel and what they in the United States are going through. So tremendous pictures coming through from Washington, including what you're seeing on your screen. Natan Sharansky himself there at the podium in 2023, just as he was in 1986.
Well, let's go to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, who is there on the ground. And Mike, it looks like impressive numbers to me, bigger than some of the estimates that were originally being given.
I've heard estimates ranging now from anywhere to 100 to up to 200,000 people. We won't know until it's all said and done, but just an incredible effort here by the American Jewish community. Everybody took off today. The Jewish community down here in America, the schools, the communal organizations, the after programs, charter buses, trains rolling in from Amtrak, all over the place. They come from all over America to be here today. And the National Mall on the other side of our camera here is packed as far back. And it's a pretty monumental scene out here. We spoke earlier with one of the co-sponsors of today's event, William Daroff, the CEO of a major American Jewish organizations. Here's William Daroff earlier today.
44 years ago.
We planned this before the big event that was here with the 2,000 people last Saturday. But the idea generally is the tens and tens of thousands of people here on the mall, regular Americans speaking out, it'll make clear that this fringe group that you see of pro-Hamas activists who are on street corners, who are at Harvard Square, really represent a fringe. You'll see here the leadership of Congress. You'll see dozens of members of Congress. And as I said, tens and thousands of Americans who stand up, who are saying this is the real America. This is the America that's represented by the polling data that the Jewish Federation of North America and the Conference of Presidents released this morning. It shows that well over 80% of Americans support the right of Israel, and in fact the obligation of Israel to defend the people of Israel.
It's war of terror and intimidation against the...
And they come from all over the country today. You look out into the crowd here and you see signs, people from Cleveland, from Chattanooga, from Los Angeles, and even Indiana, one rally goer.
I think, it's important as Israeli Americans to show my pride for being Jewish, show my support for Israel. Especially at Purdue, we don't have very many Jews, and we got a group to come out. I think bringing back the videos to school is just going to help, reignite the pride for Israel and pride for Judaism back in school. So it's very important for me to be here.
All right, as you see, impressive crowd there, bigger than anticipated. Oh, and
3 times as big as anticipated. On a weekday.
On a weekday, and of course, very important, the diversity of the crowd. I'm talking about religiously. You have Reform and Orthodox represented, not a constellation you see. Also, as you said, in groups like American for Peace Now, and a group like the ZOA, Zoners Organization of America, which is far to the right, and you have to be impressed, obviously, both on, I think, 2 fronts there, both in reaction to what is happening here and the world's reaction to what is happening there, but also reaction to what's happening in the streets of America, the surge of anti-Semitism, what we're seeing, the harassment of Jewish students in major universities, the tearing down of those hostage posters on the streets of New York, I think has really energized the community there.
Caleb, in recent years, there was so much talk of distancing, right? Distancing between Israel and American Jews. And I always believed that while that was true, and there was a lot to that, that there was an underlying and deep love that American Jews in the main had for Israel, had for the Jewish people, had for the Jewish tradition, had for the togetherness. That's what we're seeing in those pictures in Washington, right? That beneath it all of the angst, all of the political divisiveness, all of the concern, all of the assimilation, that at the end of the day, there is this deep love and this deep sense of connection that so many people had in them and wanted to express and are ready to mobilize for this genuine sense of emergency and come by the hundreds of thousands to Washington, and not only come by the hundreds of thousands of Washington today, but to have mobilized over the course of the past month. It's really a remarkable experience, I think, for American Jews. And again, a tremendous amount of energy and some incredibly powerful pictures.
All right, I'm sure many of our viewers in the U.S. are at that demonstration, but for those who are watching, later in the program we'll bring you some of the speeches we're expecting. As President Herzog to speak there, for example, but they are running a little behind the set schedule. Now, just a few minutes before that, we did hear the Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, give a briefing. He was asked specifically about the hostages and comments that U.S. President Joe Biden made today in Washington. It was at an event dealing with the climate crisis, but a reporter shouted out and asked a question about the hostages in Gaza. This is what he had to say.
President, can you address the hostages directly and give them a message of hope and resilience in these troubled times?
Yes, I can. I've been talking with the people involved every single day. I believe it's going to happen, but I don't want to get into detail.
What's your message for the families?
Hang in there. We're coming.
And there was a response also from the Prime Minister's office. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated, saying, quote, "Our hearts are always with the abductees and their families. Since the beginning of the war, we have been working continuously to free our hostages, including exerting increasing pressure since the beginning of the ground maneuver. If and when there is something concrete to report on, we will do it." Again, being very cautious not to raise expectations, certainly not making statements like we're coming. Obviously, even though there was this report, Hamas claiming that negotiations have been broken off, there is something still cooking, but we must temper our expectations and our optimism, because we've heard this from the beginning of the war, Owen, and so far really, in terms of an exchange or a deal, nothing concrete.
Right, by the way, I should just update here, there's a lot of activism still going on, and right as we speak, the march, literally the march, not the one in Washington, but the one by hostage families of those who are held hostage from Tel Aviv, walking up the hill to Jerusalem, again, to dramatize their plight. This is a protest tactic that's been used in the past in Israel, and there's also, we're expecting a press conference by the Hostage Families Forum over the course of the next few hours. Obviously, we'll keep our viewers updated on what happens. As for the hostage, I want to go back to Yoav Gallant's press conference, because there were two important points that I think he made around this issue. First, was asked about this issue of a pause or a short-term ceasefire.
A humanitarian pause.
Humanitarian pause, short-term ceasefire, although it's dangerous to use that word, it has so many meanings these days. He was asked about that, whether that would hurt the military progress. And what I understood from his answer is, essentially, once the military wraps up the operation, or materially wraps up the operation in the northern part of the Strip, at that point there could safely be that pause that wouldn't interfere with the military operation. So that's how you square that circle of achieving both of the goals, right? The victory over Hamas and the issue of returning the hostages. The second thing, the question of a public debate over the terms. On one hand, the Prime Minister's office,
Which Yoav Gallant was grilled about, of course,
correct,
going back to the Gilad Shalit deal and the release of terrorists.
and it's a tricky balance, because on one hand, the government is saying something that's undeniably true. We don't want to talk about conditions publicly. This is a negotiation that needs to be handled behind the scenes, because we don't want to show our cards. It certainly makes sense. On the other hand, Kalev, what about a public debate over an issue like releasing prisoners because of that history of the Shalit deal? And it was explained quite bluntly during that press conference, the fact that over 1,000 prisoners were released in the Gilad Shalit deal, including Yahya Sinwar himself, right? Then going back to Gaza and building up the Hamas terror organization and infrastructure, and what led us to October 7th. Is there a possibility, a real possibility, of having a public debate, even a wrenching and difficult public debate, over this deal while all of the conditions are being kept so secretive? It's a very, very difficult question. How do you balance the obvious need for secrecy with, I think, a real imperative for an open public debate, not after the fact, but before the fact?
I'm not sure we're going to have that open public debate given these circumstances, I have to say. But
I agree.
But I think there has been a consensus, at least on the kind of deal that would have to involve a truly significant number of the hostages, certainly all women, elderly, and must have had any kind of prisoner.
And we're not going back to the Shalit deal.
No, certainly not. Now, we did bring you early reports from the southern front in Gaza, the northern front on the Lebanon border. There is another front in this ongoing conflict that is perhaps getting less notice, and that is the West Bank. Now, there was a raid into the Palestinian city of Tulkarm overnight by Israeli army forces, which did spark a big firefight there, in which 8 Hamas terrorists were killed. And in a move that was once uncommon in the West Bank, but is now becoming a frequent occurrence, the IDF troops on the ground called it airstrikes to support their activity, as the troops in Gaza are now doing. Correspondent Robert Swift explains how the West Bank has become a very active front over this past month in what is now truly a multi-front conflict for the IDF.
While Israel fights in Gaza, it's striving to prevent its northern border from erupting. But the north isn't the only potential new front that is simmering. Violence in the West Bank has spiked since Hamas's October 7th assault. 8 Palestinians killed in an overnight raid by the Israeli military in Tulkarm were claimed by the Hamas terror group. Israeli troops entering the West Bank city on an arrest operation were confronted with live fire and explosives. Palestinian medics said that 3 of the killed were struck by a drone. IDF bulldozers tore up roads inside the town to mitigate against improvised explosive devices in the second raid into Tulkarm in a week. Similar raids and clashes have taken place elsewhere in the West Bank, with an operation into Jenin last week sparking a firefight and drone strike. 176 Palestinians have been killed in confrontations with the IDF since the beginning of October, according to the UN Commissioner for Human Rights. Attacks by Palestinians have continued, with 1 Israeli reserve soldier killed in the West Bank. And friction between Palestinians and Israelis living in the West Bank is soaring, with several Palestinians killed by settlers since the outbreak of war. With the IDF focused on Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in the north, its resources are not limitless. But if the West Bank violence escalates, this could impact Israel's wider war effort.
Now, as we reported earlier, there was a rocket fire from Gaza today, including here in Tel Aviv this afternoon, and there were injuries here in Tel Aviv. 3 people, 2 light and moderate, but 1 person seriously injured. Let's go to our Zach Anders, who was on, I believe, the scene of where that rocket or those shrapnel fragments landed. What happened exactly today at that spot, Zach?
Well, from our location in southern Tel Aviv, a rocket strike that's originating in Gaza over 30 miles away from where it was launched. It has struck location in southern Tel Aviv. I'll step out so that you can see what we're seeing here. The damage to the wall is probably what you're able to see best, but underneath it is a large crater several feet deep that hit a water line. The water line then exploded, and the water was rushing up and covering most of the road. Again, those 2 injuries, the 20-year-old male was injured quite severely. I spoke to 1 person on scene who said they rushed over, applied a tourniquet to his arm, and his hand was badly damaged, and that a piece of the rocket had lodged itself in his stomach. Now, the ambulance authorities are saying they were able to get here quickly and take him to a hospital, so we don't know his condition presently, but the last we heard was very serious. A 43-year-old was also minorly injured by the shrapnel. And then in this home that you can see behind me, we've been watching as the family has packed up their things, put them into suitcases and bags, and it looks like they have left for the night as well, because a lot of damage to their home. The tree in their yard, the tree facing the street, has been all but blown away, and the power lines are down all around as well. This obviously came in at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon when we all got that red alarm. One of these rockets, we're not sure if this was a failed interception, if this rocket struck this neighborhood directly. We just don't know that at this point.
Zach Anders there in Tel Aviv, not far from the studio. Zach, thank you for that. We're going to go back to the Washington rally. Israeli President Isaac Herzog speaking there.
Above all, we come together to march for good over evil, for
for human morality over bloodthirst. We march for light over darkness. 80 years ago, Jews came out of Auschwitz and vowed never again. As the blue and white flag was hoisted over our ancient homeland, we vowed never again. 40 days ago, a terrorist army invaded the sovereign state of Israel and butchered hundreds upon hundreds of Israelis in the largest massacre since the Holocaust. Let us cry out together, never again, never again, never again is now. The Hamas savagery and crimes against humanity bring to my mind, as President Biden has said, the worst rampages of ISIS. We, the people of Israel, are grateful to President Biden, his administration, and so many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. The moral clarity and bold actions of our American allies demonstrate the depth of the U.S.-Israel alliance, which is stronger than ever before. Since October 7th, Israeli society and the Jewish people have truly come together in unison. We feel our hearts beat as one. We hear our brothers and sisters' blood crying out to us from the ground. Kol dmei achika, tzoakim elai min ha'adama. Once again in Jewish history, we demand, let our people go. Whilst our loved ones are held captive in Gaza and our soldiers are fighting for our beloved Israel, Jews all over the world are assaulted for being Jewish. The hatred, the lies, the brutality, the disgraceful outbursts of ancient anti-Semitism are an embarrassment to all civilized people and nations. Jews in America must be safe. Jews all over the world must be safe. I salute you, the women and men who stand up to massive hatred and pressure in the community or on campus. Just as you stand with us, we stand with you. Dear brothers and sisters, dear friends, as President of the State of Israel, Medinat Israel, I vow to you from Jerusalem, from the Kotel, that we will heal, we will rise again, and we will rebuild. To paraphrase the prophet Zechariah, boys and girls shall once again play in the streets of Be'eri and Sderot, and the elderly shall sit peacefully by the walkways of Nachal Oz and Ofakim. And when the sounds of light and laughter return to the villages, the kibbutzim, and the cities, our constant yearning for peace will return as well. Together we pray for the safe return of our hostages. Together we pray for the full recovery of the wounded. And together we pray for our beloved sons and daughters in the IDF. May God bless them and keep them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmor v'yatzil et chayaleinu. Together we grieve and together we shall overcome. Am Yisrael Chai. God bless Israel. God bless America.
person from New York in the prayer for the IDF.
Now, we just heard Israeli President Isaac Herzog speaking there at that Washington rally. As we've been reporting, the crowd there now estimated upwards of 150,000, maybe of 200,000. That's really almost more than triple the people that were expected, largely because this was on a Tuesday during a week working day. And yet, as our Mike Wagenhahn there, you're scanning the crowd and you get a sense of it there on the National Mall. I would say, yes, definitely looks like more than even 200,000, I would say. And I'm just going to reference two things said by the Israeli President, Isaac Herzog. He used two expressions, two phrases which are quite familiar to me growing up in the New York Jewish community in the 1970s. One is let my people go, let our people go, the famous words the prophet Moses says to Pharaoh in the book of Exodus. It was adopted by the Soviet Jewry movement. We just saw Natan Sharansky speaking, and now it's, of course, being applied to the hostages. And again, tying back exactly what you said, this movement to the movement to free Soviet Jewry. But the other expression used was never again, which had, again, never again is now. That right. In the 1970s, and I grew up, that was not an expression used in the mainstream Jewish community because it was made famous by the late Rabbi Meir Kahane and his Jewish Defense League, which was seen as kind of a fringe movement at the time and a somewhat radical movement. And he popularized the phrase "never again." But you heard President Herzog do it, and you're hearing it also from other mainstream political figures in response, I think, just to the shock of what happened on October 7th, the atrocities that for some people draw back to the Holocaust, not to the Soviet Jewry movement, it draws back to the Holocaust. And of course, that's what that expression brings to mind and references. So you see that, I think it's a kind of the impact of what has happened on October 7th.
Yeah, your Brooklyn accent gives you away, right? Your memories of the 1970s. Look, Khaled, the echoes of 1987 are bouncing off of every building on the National Mall right now as we look at those pictures. Those echoes, that incredible American Jewish tradition. By the way, in terms of numbers, there were 250,000 there in 1987 at a protest that was on a Sunday and that was planned months in advance. This is a protest that was neither. It's on a weekday and it was planned from day to day, right? Week to week in the course of this emergency. And you're right, there's the sense of emergency with the echoes not only of 1987, but the echoes of now. Never again is now. The echoes of the Holocaust, the feeling of genuine emergency. And for so many of those people we see on our screens right now, the personal experience, I imagine, of the rising anti-Semitism in the United States. As for Isaac Herzog's speech, this isn't the most natural setting for him and his strength. I think he's stronger in smaller forums than he is before a crowd of 200,000. But notwithstanding the echoes of the Jewish Defense League, of course, a far-right organization with which the vast majority of people you see on your screen do not identify under any circumstances. The thrust of his speech was certainly tailored to a crowd that is by and large liberal, by and large left-leaning, a forward-looking, optimistic close that was speaking more about peace and hope than it was about war and, if you will, victory. Of course, wishing the best for the troops, but at the same time looking not to the day after in Israel's politics, but to the day after in Israeli society. And I thought that was very, very strong and exactly the right note to hit for this crowd coming out on this sunny, at least, although I imagine cold, day in Washington to again show their love for the state of Israel and Caleb to show their connection to the Jewish people.
We should say also reflecting the personal political leanings of President Herzog, who did come from the center-left Israeli politics before.
Yes.
Attaining the supposedly nonpartisan position of Israeli president. Well, of course, the hostages, the main focus of that speech and of that event there in Washington. Also, the focus of an event here in Tel Aviv. Owen made reference to it. The families of the hostages. They're having a press conference right now. Let's listen in. have started speaking, of course, singing, of course, the national anthem. The hostages, by the way, we should know this is actually sort of the second big event. There was also a march to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv today, though the first real big rainy weather or stormy weather in Israel today probably did put a damper somewhat on the attendance, though we did see crowds gaily making their way. But certainly that lobby, the hostages, calling on the government to do everything we can, not pushing necessarily for a deal, but just trying to keep it in the forefront of the discourse here in Israel, and making sure that it's on the agenda as much, even more so than the stated goals, say, for example, of destroying Hamas in the Gaza Strip.
And it's far beyond Israel, because no government anywhere in the world, at least not any government that's even remotely friendly to the state of Israel, can ignore this. It appears in just about every statement you see from foreign ministers, from prime ministers, from presidents. This is a point of international consensus that these hostages, many of them women, young children, even a baby of 9 months, we interviewed that family in I-24 News, Holocaust survivors, that these people need to be freed. And that Israel and the Israeli government saying, both I think legitimately, but also, let's be honest, cleverly, that there is no justification for calling for a ceasefire as long as these people are in captivity in those tunnels, we presume, underneath the Gaza Strip. So the capacity of this forum of families establishes days after the war. Khaled, I was there for the press conference, very crowded press conference. In the days after the war started, tools that they have used to raise awareness in Israel and far beyond have been brilliant, and I think have had a tremendous effect. We can only hope that the hostages are brought home as soon as possible, as safely and shrewdly away as possible.
Right, and I just want to, we're coming to the end of this hour, to bring up again Noah Marciano, the 19-year-old soldier who was captured, Corporal Noah Marciano. She was, according to RDF statement, it was only days, some 3-4 days after she was taken hostage, perhaps suffering wounds in that she passed away. Those exact circumstances have not been made public. There was a video released last evening in which, obviously under duress, or a so-called hostage video, obviously being made to say certain things. I should note that I-24 News, along with the rest of the Israeli media, did not air that video, as has been the case with other hostage videos, of course, taking into concern primarily the concerns of the families who have asked in those cases that they not be broadcast. So we just, of course, say in her memory, may her memory be a blessing. And, of course, wish the safe return of all the other hostages. Owen Alterman, stay with us. We are going to continue into the second hour of this broadcast on I-24 News. Israel at war against Hamas, Day 39. We'll be right back. Stay with us here on I-24 News.
Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel.